What's going on, everybody? Coach William Grazione here. I really appreciate all of the engagement on the dietary fat video that we put out on YouTube the other day. So thank you guys so much. So what I wanted to do was bring you guys a full in-depth review in regards to carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, and just talk to you guys in this video today about carbohydrates. So in regards to carbohydrates in and of themselves, why does society seem to have this massive carbophobia? Now, the first thing is that a lot of diets are generated or created around lower carbohydrate intakes. Now, why essentially is that? You have to understand that it's not necessarily that the carbohydrates are bad, it's that eliminating the carbohydrates is placing you into a caloric deficit, and thus, as a side effect of placing you into caloric deficit, that's why you're losing body fat. So it's not the carbohydrates in and of themselves that are the bad thing, it's that you've eliminated a whole food group and that's placed you in a deficit, and your metabolism is operating faster than the amount of calories that you're putting in it, and thus is causing you to lose body fat. So society has actually also demonized carbohydrates and saying that, hey, when I eat carbohydrates, I gain weight. And that's essentially coming from a lot of these lower carbohydrate dieters. Whereas what you have to understand is that when you put carbohydrates back into your body, obviously if you put water on a dry sponge, it's going to suck everything back up. And that will cause you to gain some weight because glucose is basically going to be stored intramuscular. So therefore you will gain some weight because the carbohydrate is going to pull water into your muscle cells. And then on the other side of that, if you have sugar, that's going to replenish liver glycogen, which could also make you retain some water weight and cause you to gain weight. So keep that in mind. Carbohydrates are not bad. However, you have to learn how to apply carbohydrates to be a helpful tool to actually help you lose more body fat. Yes, that is correct. You heard me right. You can actually utilize carbohydrates, utilize glucose and fructose as a means to help you break weight loss plateaus. Stay there, stay with me. I'm going to catch you guys up, but I just want to get that information out there to get your attention so that you can continue to watch the slides that are going to be coming up. Now, you guys know that reduction in carbohydrate is the fastest way to lose weight. At least that's the way it's been categorized or kind of placed into society. It's very attractive. It's very sexy. Hey, eliminate your carbohydrate, lose weight fast. Yes, that's true. However, what you have to understand is that metabolic adaptation comes along with that. And most people don't understand or aren't educated enough to understand the power of glucose or fructose in that those things actually send signals throughout your metabolism, throughout your physiology, when those levels are elevated or when those levels are suppressed. And the higher the glucose is, in most cases, that's going to cause your metabolism to actually burn more calories. So if you've ever heard anybody say, hey, utilize this supplement, increase your metabolism, or eliminate carbohydrate, increase your metabolism, both of those are, in my opinion, they're full of crap. Supplementing things won't necessarily improve your metabolism. That can only be done long-term or with a lot of power through the implication of actually utilizing glucose as a means to elevate metabolic rate and elevate the hormones that are associated with metabolic rate so that you can improve your metabolism so you can break that weight loss plateau and keep on going. Stay with me, hear me out. The other thing is athletic performance versus cognitive performance. Now, there are some instances where carbohydrates can make you stupid. Yes, that's correct. You heard me right. Carbohydrates can make you stupid. However, what I want you to think about is it's only an overaccumulation of carbohydrate, which is actually making you having a chemical reaction within your brain that's not allowing you to be as cognitively sharp and as cognitively focused as maybe you would be, say, for instance, if you would have fasted first thing in the morning. Moving on, what are carbohydrates? Carbohydrates are one of the three main macronutrients: fats, carbs, proteins. However, in most cases, carbohydrates are viewed as being a non-essential macronutrient, but I want to explain later on why I think carbohydrates are a non-essential essential macronutrient. So the first thing to think about is that carbohydrates consist of carbon, they consist of hydrogen and oxygen, and the hydrogen and oxygen are in the same ratio as water, okay? So hydrogen and oxygen, same ratio as water. You may hear people within the evidence-based space call carbohydrates CHO for short. That's because that essentially is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Now the thing about carbohydrates is that there's gonna be 4 calories per gram of carbohydrates. So 50 grams of carbohydrates is gonna yield you 200 calories. All right, and the thing is that most people think about carbohydrates as being the main fuel source, or they provide us energy, or calories provide us energy. However, calories and carbohydrates have to be converted through the Krebs cycle to be able to allow our body to produce ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, so that's what actually gives us the energy. It's not the calories directly, or it's not the carbohydrates directly, it's the conversion of those two things through the Krebs cycle that creates ATP. The second thing, or the last thing in regards to this slide is going to be glucose, okay? So glucose replenishes muscle glycogen, okay? So if you ever dieted down, you ever gotten extremely lean, glucose is gonna help you replenish muscle glycogen, okay? Fructose is gonna help you replenish liver glycogen. So keep that in mind, that whenever you're having these higher carbohydrate days, or you're having a refeed or a multiple day refeed or a diet break, it's a good idea to have at least 25% of your carbohydrates coming by way of fructose and 75% of your carbohydrates coming by way of glucose. Moving on, we're rocking and rolling. Carbohydrates roll in the body. Keep in mind that I said earlier, guys, it is the preferred energy system. Your body prefers to utilize glucose over things like ketones, which obviously I know that it's being very popularized with the ketogenic diet to utilize ketones. However, if you are an anaerobic athlete, if you spend time lifting weights and you want to build muscle, you want to optimize athletic performance, and you want your metabolism to be as healthy, as inefficient as possible, you will need glucose in your diet to be able to do that. Anaerobic activities are driven by glucose. Keep that in mind. So like I said earlier, glucose basically fuels a very powerful hormone called leptin. Leptin then sends a signal, depending on how high leptin is or how low leptin is, that's going to send a signal to your pituitary gland, and that signal is then sent to your thyroid, basically telling your body how many calories it's capable of burning or how many calories it needs to conserve. Because low carbohydrate diets will drastically drop leptin, which will then send the signal to preserve energy, so your body's not going to be burning as many calories over the course of a diet. However, if you have intermittent calorie restriction, meaning that you have these higher carbohydrate days or multiple carbohydrate days stacked on top of each other, and then you're going to have lower bouts of fat loss phases where there's a caloric deficit installed. Basically, utilizing that intermittent calorie cycling can actually help you optimize metabolic rate, help you optimize the hormones associated with metabolism, so you can continue to burn body fat and break those stubborn weight loss plateaus. Like I said earlier, carbohydrates are a non-essential, essential macronutrient. And the reason I want to say that is because if you are an anaerobic athlete of any type of capacity, if you're a power lifter, if you're a bodybuilder specifically, you know, maybe you do CrossFit or something like that, where the activity is anaerobic, okay? You're moving against resistance, all right? You're trying to build muscle, you're trying to optimize athletic performance. I believe carbohydrates are essential, okay? So if you want to maximize, you're going to need carbohydrate. I don't think you can maximize your ability to build muscle or do anything unless you're like an ultra marathoner, to where utilizing ketones for fuel would be better suited for you. So just keep that in mind, guys, that if you want to be able to build the most amount of muscle mass or optimize your athletic performance, in most cases, utilizing some form of anaerobic activity, that's going to be done by way of carbohydrate. Now, on the other side of that, if you're like a super marathoner, or again, you're an Ironman, triathlon, something like that, you can get away with utilizing a ketogenic approach to be able to do that, because your body will convert from utilizing glucose as fuel to utilizing ketones as fuel. And depending on the rate of the metabolic rate of the individual, it could take a couple of weeks, or it could take a little bit longer than that. All depends on what approach you choose to utilize and how fast of a metabolizer you are and how much activity you're doing. Number 5, carbohydrates, obviously good or bad. I think we're placing them in these awkward categories. So the carbohydrates are nor good nor bad. I would just urge you to think about some of the things that I'm going to mention here, so you can basically decide whether or not carbohydrates are good or bad for you. This or that, the idea that I want to talk about there is whole food carbohydrates versus processed food carbohydrates. Now, there was a very good research review within Monthly Applications in Strength Sport, probably I think it was like a couple weeks back, where research came out in regards to comparing whole foods versus processed foods. And now there's an understanding that basically your body will require more energy to break down, process, and assimilate a whole food versus a processed food carbohydrate. So in theory, if you want to be able to burn more calories during a fat loss phase or burn more calories during a diet, I would ideally recommend you, the majority of your diet come from whole food carbohydrates versus processed food carbohydrates. However, processed food carbohydrates can be utilized as a means to keep you adherent to your diet. We all have that one specific food. For me, it's dark chocolate and ice cream. So that's like my 5 to 10% of my diet, you know, that I have this processed food item that I keep in there so that I can be adherent and I can eat my normal foods throughout the day. Last and final slide, this is slide number 6. I think we're gonna be able to get all of this in within the 10 minutes that Instagram story or Instagram TV allows. So we're rocking and rolling. Use carbohydrates to help you adhere. Like I just said, guys, I'm a dark chocolate and ice cream snob, so I gotta have that in sometime, somewhere within my diet. Whatever that thing is for you, utilize carbohydrate, utilize that processed food item as a means to say, hey, I'm all good because I know that at the end of the day, or maybe once a day, I have my vice. Whatever that vice food is, that vice food can actually help you adhere to your diet. Second thing, do not eliminate carbohydrate completely. Anytime you eliminate a whole food group out of your diet, chances are that's going to be far too restrictive for you, and that may lead you down a gnarly hole of not being able to adhere to anything long term and developing some type of binging behavior. And I don't say that lightly because I know that that problem is very widespread within the health and fitness community. But what I would say is that in most cases, you don't want to be overly restrictive, as once the pendulum swings in one direction, it's probably going to swing back in the other direction equally as fast. Understand that carbohydrates can be utilized as a tool, like I said, with the modalities that we have available, such as refeed days, multiple day refeed days, 3 refeed days in a row, diet breaks, extended diet breaks, transition phases, recovery phases, and all of these various things. We have the tools to be able to break weight loss plateaus. So keep in mind that carbohydrates in and of themselves can be utilized as a means to help you adhere to your diet, as a means to help you recover from the onset of stress, inflammation, fatigue, and all of that takes place during a caloric deficit or a prolonged caloric deficit. The amounts will vary. So how many carbohydrates per day, guys? The amounts will vary based off of your metabolism, your energy activity level, your total daily energy expenditure, and various other things. So the amount, I can't necessarily tell you what the amount specifically for you is, but what I hope to do in this video is just provide you some more in-depth understanding and like a crash course in carbohydrate. Second from last thing is performance versus cognition. Now, there are a lot of individuals who will eat high levels of carbohydrate. They start to get loopy, they start to get delirious, they can't necessarily focus too sharply. For those individuals, what I would say is that you kind of have to play the game of when do I want to be cognitively sharp and when do I care more about my performance. So as an example, I have genetically high blood sugar because everybody in my family is overweight. So I was passed down that epigenetic trait from other individuals in my family. And basically, I have to be very aware of when I choose to eat carbohydrate because it can massively impact my ability to speak and communicate to my clients. So as an example, I will have carbohydrates around training times, and I will limit carbohydrates around times where I'm doing a lot of phone calls or I'm doing interviews or podcasts and various things like that. Now, a good way to be able to gain control, so again, this is to grab control of it, this is to take power over it, is to utilize a glucometer, okay? Now, in most cases, most people would strive to be anywhere from 75 to 90, maybe even under 100 would be a great place for the majority of people. Now, if you are 120 in a fasted blood glucose state or anything over that, that's gonna be pre-diabetic, and that's what you wanna essentially avoid. So how many carbohydrates can be predicated or can be dictated based off of that blood glucose reading. So ideally, you wanna keep your fasted blood glucose anywhere from 75, 80, maybe up to the low 100s, I would say would probably be a good range for the majority of people. And anybody who's 120 or over, chances are you need to be able to utilize that glucometer to be able to regulate your carbohydrate intake. All right, guys, my name is William Grazione. I hope I got all this done within 10 minutes that Instagram TV allows. God bless all of you. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.